We are about to delve into a tradition that is steeped in symbolism. But this is not an exploration of rumor or conspiracy, not at all. This is about a documented philosophical evolution. It's the story of how the simple tools of stonemasons were reimagined to design better human beings. This is an exploration of the architects of truth. This quote, well, it really lays out the foundational premise for our entire discussion. The core idea here is that of an unbroken lineage, a sort of golden chain of knowledge, a chain passed down not through armies or holy books, but through a personal process of initiation. It suggests that the very same quest for light that animated the ancient mystery schools in places like Egypt and Greece was carefully preserved, hidden in the coded language of the stonemasons, the very men who built Europe's great cathedrals. And eventually, it was distilled into the philosophical system that we now know as Freemasonry. So here's the path we're going to take on this journey. We'll start with the central metaphor of light and trace its ancient roots. Then we'll meet the keepers of the craft who guarded this knowledge. From there, we'll witness the great shift from building things to building character, explore the deep meaning of initiation, and finally conclude with the ideal of a universal brotherhood. So what's the common thread? What binds all these traditions together across thousands of years? Well, it's the use of architecture as a kind of grand metaphor. Think about it. The tools of a stonemason, the square, the compasses, the plumb line, they get transformed from instruments that shape stone into symbols for shaping one's own character. Geometry. It becomes the blueprint not for a cathedral of granite, but for a temple of the soul. And what's the point of all this symbolic construction? It's the cultivation of these core virtues. You see, this is the ultimate goal of the entire system. Mental humility, to recognize just how little one truly knows. Rectitude, to act with an unshakable honesty. Brotherly love and relief, to care for all of humanity. Universal tolerance, to see beyond rigid dogma. And of course, a never-ending search for truth. These are the very pillars of that inner temple. To really understand this stream of thought, we have to go back to its source. The philosophical seeds of this initiatory tradition were planted thousands of years ago in the priestly colleges and the mystery schools of the ancient world. Their goal was to understand the hidden workings of the cosmos, and they did it through symbol and through ceremony. And this ancient stream seems to have developed along two main channels. On the one hand, you had the Aryan tradition. This was often associated with imperial power, a more, let's say, top-down, cerebral understanding of divine secrets. And on the other hand, you had the Kabiric tradition. This one was more rooted in the earth, drawing its wisdom from nature and from local indigenous peoples. But both of these currents, in their own way, sought to pass on a hidden knowledge through a system of initiation. Now, as these ancient streams flowed into the late antique world, they mingled and formed a really powerful philosophical movement, Gnosticism. The Gnostics were, above all else, seekers of gnosis, or knowledge. See, they weren't content with faith alone. They believed that salvation came from a direct, personal, experiential understanding of divine truth, usually found by studying ancient wisdom. This absolute dedication to seeking knowledge, while it provided a critical philosophical and theological bridge to the symbolism that would come later in Masonry. The Gnostics became absolute masters of preservation, especially in a world that was often hostile to their ideas. To protect their teachings, they developed a kind of esoteric camouflage, attributing their wisdom to well-known, accepted scriptural figures. Their key texts, like the Pistis Sophia, weren't just about Greek philosophy. They explicitly claimed to reveal the mysteries of Egypt. They encoded incredibly complex ideas into single symbols, like the abraxas, which you can see as a clear forerunner to the personal marks of medieval Masons. And they really understood how to imbue physical objects with spiritual meaning, turning a simple stone into a powerful talisman. Now, as the Roman Empire crumbled and Europe fell into what we call the Dark Ages, this entire chain of knowledge could have easily been broken forever. But it wasn't. It was preserved by a remarkable, and frankly often overlooked, guild of architects and builders, the Magistri Comicini, or the Comicene masters. They became the keepers of the craft. These masters were likely descended from the Roman artisan colleges, the Collegia Ferbrarum, and they organized themselves into this highly disciplined hierarchical structure. At the very top, you had the Castaldo, the chief, the master architect of the entire organization. Below him were the Soprastante, the supervisors, who made sure everything was built to the highest standards. And then the actual work was carried out by the Magistri, the master craftsmen, who would gather in local units they called loggi, which is the direct Italian precursor to the Masonic Lodge. The Comicene masters left a kind of symbolic signature on their work, and this right here is a perfect example of their method. Their most important symbol was the Solomon's knot. Now, look closely. This isn't just a pretty pattern. It's a single, continuous line with no beginning and no end. For them, this was a profound theological statement carved right into the stone, representing the infinite, incomprehensible, and unified nature of the divine. It's a concept that couldn't be written in a book. It had to be shown. Okay, we now arrive at what is arguably the most crucial transformation in this entire lineage. This is the moment when the focus turns completely inward. This is the point where the tools, the language, and the organization that for centuries had been used to build magnificent physical cathedrals were repurposed for an even more ambitious project, building the moral and spiritual temple inside each individual human being. Now, this shift, it didn't just happen overnight. You can see a very clear progression on this timeline. From the artisan colleges of Rome, the knowledge was preserved by those Comacene guilds in Lombardy. It then spread to England, where it merged with the Anglo-Saxon guild tradition. This slow, centuries-long evolution then culminated in a single, definitive moment. In 1717, 4 lodges in London met and formed the first Grand Lodge, and this marks the official birth of modern, or what we call speculative, Freemasonry. What's so interesting about this table is just how clearly it lays out the transformation. Let's break it down. The whole purpose shifted, from physical building to spiritual building. Membership expanded, from actual stonemasons to men from all walks of life, philosophers, scientists, artists, all interested in moral questions. The tools, once used for literal measurement, now became symbols for virtue, the square for honesty, the compasses for keeping one's passions in check. And crucially, authority shifted from these informal gatherings based on old customs to a formal, chartered system under a grand lodge. But maybe the most revolutionary change of all is in theology, from demanding adherence to the state religion to this brand new principle of a universal belief. We'll come back to that. It's important. So, the big question is, how is this inner temple actually built? Well, the central mechanism is the ceremony of initiation, and it's really important to understand that this is not just a rite of passage into a social club. No, it is a carefully constructed psychological drama, a symbolic journey designed to trigger a profound internal transformation, a kind of rebirth of the spirit. The word itself really gives us the biggest clue. Initiation comes from the Latin in aere, which means to go within. The entire process is an inward journey. It's a structured method for peeling back the layers of our superficial identity, our preconceived notions, to try and discover a more essential, more authentic self. Philosophically, you can see it runs parallel to sacred rites like baptism. It represents a symbolic death of the old self and a rebirth into a new, more enlightened state of being. This journey of initiation is framed by these 2 great symbolic states. We all begin, it is said, in a state of darkness. Now, this doesn't mean evil, it means ignorance. It's just the natural human condition of being unaware of our deeper potential, kind of fumbling through life guided only by our baser instincts. The goal of initiation, then, is to lead the candidate out of this darkness and into a state of light, an awakened consciousness, a deliberate and illuminated search for truth and for self-knowledge. And this journey isn't one you can undertake lightly. The preparation is every bit as important as the ceremony itself. The candidate first has to undergo a kind of mental unclothing, setting aside the arrogance of what they think they already know. They have to become like a child again, teachable and willing to be guided. They're also divested of all metals, a powerful symbol that their quest is not for money or status, but for spiritual wisdom, a pure heart hunger. And finally, they're left alone to reflect on the deepest questions of existence, to make absolutely certain their motivations are pure before they begin. So in this final section, we get to examine the end product of this long philosophical lineage. What does this system, forged over so many centuries, ultimately create? Well, it creates a framework for universal brotherhood, one that's based on shared virtues. But this very ideal, this radical idea of tolerance would also invite some incredibly fierce opposition and persecution. And that opposition was not just intellectual, it was physical, it was brutal. Just consider this harrowing account of John Custos, a Freemason who fell into the hands of the Lisbon Inquisition. For refusing to betray his vows, for refusing to renounce his beliefs, he was systematically tortured again and again. This account, it's not an abstraction. It's a visceral testament to the violent clash between a system of universal tolerance and one of absolute dogma. It shows you the profound conviction that was required of those who chose to walk this path. But beyond the dungeons of the Inquisition, the fraternity faced a totally different kind of assault: public ridicule.
In the, let's say, boisterous club culture of 18th century England, it was very easy to dismiss Masonry as just another free and easy society. Satirists painted them as nothing more than a noisy drinking club, and they claimed their greatest, most profound secret was simply the location of the next bottle of wine. And in its own way, this trivialization was just as dangerous as open persecution.
And this slide right here, this shows you exactly why they faced so much opposition. This is the single most revolutionary idea that speculative Freemasonry introduced to the world. The old rule, the operative Mason's rule, was conformity. You must be of the state religion, period. The new principle was a Copernican shift in human relations. It required only a belief in what it called that religion in which all men agree, a universal, non-dogmatic belief in a supreme being, while leaving all the particular opinions to the individual's own conscience. In an age of bloody religious warfare, this was a radical, even dangerous act of peace.
Now, to be perfectly clear, Freemasonry never sought to be a new religion. It defined its role as the handmaid of religion. Its purpose was to be a supportive space, charitable, educational, moral, a place where the divisive quarrels of politics and religion were strictly forbidden. The goal was to create a common ground, to demonstrate a fatherhood of God that therefore implied a brotherhood of man, rising above the sectarian conflicts that had torn the world apart for centuries. And so we conclude our journey right back where it began, with the tools of the builder. For centuries, the square, the level, and the plumb roll were used to raise magnificent cathedrals of stone up towards the heavens. Today, those physical tools have become symbolic heirs. They're instruments of moral philosophy passed down through this long, unbroken chain, which leaves us with one final, essential question to contemplate. What are we, in our own lives, building with them today?